Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. Today, we tell you the adjustments the Knicks need to make coming out of Game 1, how they can get Jalen Brunson free, and how to deal with Joel Embiid on both ends of the floor. All that and more right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, and today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. And I wanted to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, because we're now available on all platforms. So check us out on YouTube. We want to ensure you don't miss a single episode throughout the playoffs, because that is the time you need to listen. So be sure to hit that subscription button, that notifications bell, to ensure you don't miss one. And then the auto download function on your podcast platform of choice if you want to take us on your walk or bike ride. But who's talking to you? I'm Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. I've been covering the NBA for a decade now. He is Alex Wolfe, editor-in-chief of The Strickland, the greatest Knicks website in the whole wide world. He was born to hoop. He was born to edit. You can check out all their work on all forms of social media at thestrick.land. And Alex, we are talking adjustments heading into Game 2. The Knicks take Game 1, 111-104. Was certainly not a perfect performance from the New York Knicks. Jalen Brunson, one of the worst postseason games of his career, certainly since he's ascended to star status over the last 3 seasons. The Knicks shoot under 40% from 2-point range. They shoot under 40% overall. OG Anunoby only has 10 points, and yet they're able to come away with a victory. That being said, there's more the Sixers can do as well. What are you looking at as the key battlegrounds as we pivot over to Game 2?
I think Joel Embiid is kind of the main story, right? Because we saw what he did to the Knicks, in the early goings of the game, all the way up to the point of that ill-fated dunk that clearly in part derailed his night. I mean, I got to give Mitchell Robinson props too for having his part in derailing, Embiid's night as well. But there was obviously he threw that ball off the backboard, went up, dunked it, and then immediately went down clutching his knee. There was the overhead shot of him looking like he was just staring blankly into the heavens, assuming maybe his season had just ended. There was a lot going on right there. And we saw him come back in the second half. I mean, testament to him for clearly still being banged up, still having a rough go of it with that knee, but still managing to, come back and try to go on it. But he didn't really look himself again in the second half. I would argue that he played harder in the second half than he played in that Heat game. I think in that Heat game, he was just sleepwalking. For like 80% of it until the last, 5 minutes when he finally, made those couple threes and hit the couple passes to Batum for the threes and all that stuff, which was, we obviously know the story of that already. But there was really not even any of that in the second half against the Knicks. He looked like he was turned into a perimeter player more or less. And Joel Embiid doing a Steve Novak impression is nothing but good for the Knicks if that's how he's going to play the game. So I guess my 2 questions, Gavin, going into this game, which I think are going to shape things heavily, are one, which version of Embiid shows up? Is it pre-dunk Embiid or post-dunk Embiid, which is a hilarious way to frame 2 versions of a player, but it was his first dunk since coming back, so I guess that's the way to go. But what's gonna happen there? Dick Nurse today said Embiid told him the knee felt good, but of course Embiid's gonna say that to him. Of course, that's what they're gonna say to the press. I don't know how much to take out of that.
He's in a lot of pain, guys.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you guys. He was in the training room for 3 hours today. Things look pretty rough. Nobody's gonna say that. So I guess we'll see. But then my other question, and this is the big thing for me, Gavin, and I know that Tibbs is change averse, but not as much in the playoffs. Even dating back to the 20-21 season, we've seen him be willing to make changes in the playoffs if he thinks they're beneficial to the team, way more so than he normally does during the regular season, where it takes him at least a 12-game sample before he does anything. But do you start Mitch just in case in this game? Because he held Embiid to 2 of 11 shooting when he guarded him the other night. The Knicks just looked like a totally different team with Mitch out there. And that's not a knock on Hartenstein, but Hartenstein was kind of playing more of a style to almost try like ball denial on Embiid.
He's
Like we
fretting
saw
him a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, like we saw early, he was trying to get around him to go for steals and stuff like that, which allowed Embiid to kind of get going on the inside early, which is what you don't want to do. Whereas Mitch was just the whole game, like, get the ball if you want. I don't care. Like, you're not going to score it, and just standing there taking the full brunt of Embiid into him every single time because Mitch is one of like, I don't know, a half dozen players in the NBA that's physically equipped to do that. And I thought that he really impacted the game that way. I know that Tibbs can be stubborn to a fault sometimes, but I feel like if the Knicks want to put their best foot forward and Embiid ends up starting this game, which he is questionable for at the moment, that they should probably start Mitch.
Yeah, I'm not quite ready to go there. I don't know if it's the right or wrong call, but that's mostly because I think Hartenstein's passing is going to be so important to get Brunson going, which we can talk about as we go throughout. And I just think Hartenstein has a better defensive performance in him. Even though I'm with you, Mitch just has a higher physical ceiling than Hartenstein. Like, he's taller, he's stronger, he has longer arms. And Mitch was, I mean, to your point, like, going back and watching, and now I'm gonna reference this a lot. So shout out to Benji Ritholtz's post game thread. You can check that out over on Knicks Film School's Twitter. Big asset to me compiling these notes together. Just watching back some of the clips of Mitch guarding him, like, it's astounding at Mitch's size, like how low in his stance he's able to get. I referenced the play the other night where Mitch just kind of picked Embiid's pocket and ended up forcing a shot clock violation. So there's a fair case to it, but I think the scheming there goes beyond that and gets a little into Tyrese Maxey as well, because we noted coming into this series, it was going to be really interesting to see if Tibbs started OG Anunoby on Tyrese Maxey. And in my mind, if they were doing that, and I think a lot of other people agreed with this, that was saying more about how they wanted to guard Embiid than almost how they wanted to guard Maxey, because Anunoby, I think it's clear McBride's the best option on Maxey, not Anunoby, and Anunoby's almost more helpful off the ball. What that gives you access to is you can then switch to pick and roll and put Anunoby on Embiid. But the Knicks got even more aggressive with that as this game went along. I think potentially like empowered by the fact that Embiid just wasn't moving as well as he did earlier in this game, where it looked like, I mean, whether it was Mitch, whether it was Hartenstein in the first quarter, it seemed like he was going to drop 60, right? Like the Knicks had zero answer for him. Later in the game, they went as bold as like, all right, we're switching Deuce McBride onto you, and we're switching Mitchell Robinson onto Maxey. And what was interesting is the Knicks got more hurt switching a big onto Maxey than they did switching a small onto Embiid. Obviously, with Embiid, the premise was someone was going to come over and help. So I'm curious to see how much the Knicks continue to lean in that direction on Joel Embiid. The other big thing for me is just bringing more aggressive help, like when he has a post up on a non-big. And I think that was more so an issue early in this game. But like the play, or one of the plays you were referencing where Hartenstein was fronting him, like Embiid just got an easy layup, throwing it over the top. Josh Hart was too far away. And if the shooter is anyone other than Buddy Hield or Tyrese Maxey and Kyle Lowry to a slightly lesser extent, you just have to help. And I know Embiid's a really good passer. I know he can punish you on that. Kelly Oubre was just a 31% three-point shooter. Tobias Harris is just so far in his own head right now. I'm daring those guys to hit open threes versus Embiid just getting easy dunks, whether it's on a front or it's on a small switching onto him. And that didn't happen as much later in the game just because he wasn't as aggressive and the Knicks got different matchups, but it's something I'm looking at.
Yeah, for sure. It is crazy when you're just mentioning Tobias Harris. You saw the report from our buddy Keith Pompey, who we just talked to, that Tobias Harris apparently is already planning his way to Detroit in the midst of the playoffs. It's just,
I mean, it's not a great mentality to say, yeah, I'm going to go to like the third worst team in the league while your team is like nominally like a championship contender this year. Like it doesn't seem like he's in the right place.
all just like for comfort, because obviously he's not going to be winning too much there. He just wants to go there and make a bunch of money and chill, I guess. I don't know. Lights are too bright, as a player said last year. But yeah, I'm with you. Like, I think I guess there is a case to be made of just keeping Hartenstein out there and keeping, just changing his mentality a bit. I wonder if Hartenstein kind of maybe got in his own head a little bit about Embiid and, seeing Embiid come out there. He's such an imposing presence. Like, he is a good deal bigger than Hartenstein. So maybe Hartenstein just kind of figured, I have to play this almost like I'm a 4 and he's a 5 sort of, and, try to get the ball away from him more so than trying to, just muscle up with him and go straight up with him. But I think if Hartenstein's willing to just play that way and keep his hands under control, because I know Hartenstein loves to go for the steal and everything, but like you just have to play Embiid differently. Like right now, if he's at all uncomfortable with his knees and stuff, he's not going to have the lateral quickness to beat you, and he's not going to, be able to like make that quick spin move on you or something to get around and go up for a layup. Like that's just not his bag right now. The only thing that he can do,
Alex, I just sorry for cutting in, but like
Yeah.
the only time he was effective in the second half, like driving, was in transition where he could just get ahead of steam and he just barreled into Mitchell Robinson. He's going to get those calls, but there was none of the, to your point, none of the footwork we saw in the first half.
Exactly. So I mean, they'll just have to keep a good eye on how he's looking in warmups for one thing, but then for two, just kind of, I don't know, it's morbid, but just hope that the other shoe drops, so to speak, and that at some point he ends up messing that knee up again, because it just seems to happen every game at this point, where it's tough for him to go of 35 40-minute game without some sort of flare up at this point, because that things are just so tough with that injured knee at the moment. But Jalen Brunson obviously had a pretty tough game as well, so we're going to talk about how he can remedy the situation. Likewise, how the Knicks can beat the Sixers zone, which they went to, and some other notes, including Dante DiVincenzo, little notes for Tibbs, possibly going forward into game 2 and through this series. So we got a bunch more to talk about when we get back to Locked On Knicks.
But first, we want to tell you about our good friends over at Prize Picks. I'm going to tell you what Prize Picks is. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app. With more than 3 million members, it is the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You pick more or less on 2 or more player stat projections and watch the winnings rolling on. So many other sites, you're competing against people who have the capital to put hundreds of entries, literally hundreds of entries at a time. And you're just not going to beat those people. They do this for a living. You get on Prize Picks, you don't even have to worry about that. And we also want to remind you to get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball, hockey, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, guys, we are back on Locked On Knicks, continuing to talk through adjustments that the Knicks are going to have to make to continue to win in this series. So we're gonna go a little bit more player specific and a little bit more broad, but we wanted to tackle the 2 biggest names in this series, Joel Embiid and now Jalen Brunson. Alex, what are kind of the main ingredients for Jalen Brunson to get off to a better start in game 2?
Yeah, we kind of talked about this a little bit on the post-game pod, but I wanted to just say it again. He needs to cut down on the foul baiting. Like, I thought that was the biggest thing that really made things get off to an awkward start for the Knicks in game 1, and why they fell down so early, because Brunson seemed more concerned with getting the foul call than making a shot for large parts of that first quarter. And it was like, you mentioned it, you always love the term booty jail. He's throwing his defender back there, trying to lure them in, lure them in for a foul, whether it's the guy who ended up in front of him or the guy behind him. And yet we saw like Philly did put longer defenders on him, like Kelly Oubre, who then had the ability to block him from behind or challenge a shot from behind without fouling. And it just wasn't working. And, I think that there was the fact that the Knicks seem more interested in just getting the ball in Brunson's hands and getting him going early on than running a more cohesive team style of ball, which, if you're Brunson and you're the leader of the team and, all that, I can understand wanting to set the tone for your team early by scoring, but he also has to be able to identify when it's time to just start, be like, okay, shots aren't going in for me at this moment. Let me start just using my gravity to get Dante DiVincenzo involved, or, let's give it to Josh Hart and let him run the offense. I'll try to hit a spot up 3 or whatever, which will be one of my notes during the part where we're talking more just about the zone and how to beat the zone. But, I think it's really, thing one, just play smarter to start. Don't play with the objective of getting fouls in mind. Just play with the objective of trying to score the basketball and let the fouls come as they will. Because when you're Jalen Brunson, that you're going to get that attention, and those fouls are going to come for you.
Yeah, and I think one of the fun niche battles in this series, and again, shout out to our buddy Benji, does a better job breaking this down than anyone. He had a whole thread on this, but just the way the Sixers were, and this is something we anticipated coming into the series, like finding different ways to use Josh Hart's man to bother Jalen Brunson. And when they went to zone in the fourth quarter, like that was kind of the most egregious example of it, where over and over again they would send, instead of having Embiid trap hard, because Embiid, one, like probably doesn't have the cardio shape to do that. Two, with after the knee injury, doesn't really have the mobility anymore to do that necessarily. They just said, all right, we're just going to send Hart's guy, and if you want to swing it to him for an open three, so be it. And the adjustment that the Knicks were able to make on that, like initially was moving hard around the court, and Nick Nurse kind of countered and said, all right, we're going to figure out ways to move guys around so we can still leave only Hart open. And the Knicks said, or Tom Thibodeau said, all right, here's one way you definitely can't do this. And they had Hart come up and set the screen with Hartenstein. And then if Hart's man is involved in the action, there's no way for him to then leave Josh Hart open, because if you leave Josh Hart open, Brunson's curling around his side of that screen into an open three. And what did that result in? The OG Anunoby left wing three that ultimately, obviously there were more shots to come, but that was probably the dagger and the shot the Knicks needed to win this game. So I think just that chess match between Nick Nurse and Tom Thibodeau, and it's weird because it's not Brunson specific. It's not something he can change, but ultimately, like, Brunson is not going to win if there are three guys in a crowd around him and he's looking to score the basketball. But if he strings out those plays and then gets off the ball, as he did perfectly that time, keeping three guys around him, dribbling just long enough to ensure OG was wide open, that's how the Knicks can win those possessions. And then Tibbs can help him further by putting lineups on the floor that feature the most amount of shooting, which means maybe even getting all three of Dante, Bogey, and OG Anunoby on the floor. And you're pretty small at that point, so I don't think there'll be a lot of minutes. But at that point, you don't give Philadelphia any place to help out unless, again, they want Embiid to come up and trap the ball, because the center is the only one on the floor who can't shoot. And you're going to bleed some points defensively on the other end, but I think those lineups could score a whole lot because they don't really present Philadelphia any easy outlets in that pick and roll game.
The thing is, too, I don't know if you would even bleed that many points. I mean, especially if, and we saw the Knicks go to this lineup for at least a little bit in game one, and it was pretty effective. If you just swap, and I mean, hopefully you're getting a better performance out of Dante going forward, and like a more impactful performance going forward. But if you swap Dante for Deuce, like suddenly you've got enough defense out there. I think, like, if you've got him, Anunoby, and then either Mitch or Hartenstein out there, that's more than enough defense and enough shooting if Deuce can continue, which at this point, there's no reason to think that Deuce won't. I mean, he was a 40% shooter the entire season, no matter what the volume was, no matter what the playtime situation was. Like, he shot 40%. So, maybe he doesn't shoot 5 for 7 in the next game, but he shoots 3 for 7 or 4 for 7 or something. Like, that's fine. It's more than enough spacing, and we'll keep things honest. But I'm with you. Like, no matter what defense that the Sixers were in, there was constantly just like 3 or 4 bodies around Brunson at all times. And they were not being shy about it. Like, they were having guys really cheat over pretty hard. And a lot of times it was Hart's man, to your point, like Kelly Oubre potentially, or Tobias Harris, or whoever, Tyrese Maxey, sometimes they had on him. Like, no matter who it was, that was the guy they were looking to bring over. I think the main thing you can look to do too, especially on the perimeter, is try to find Brunson the matchup that he wants. The only problem was that the Knicks did do that a handful of times in the first game. And like, I think Maxey was the matchup they were hunting.
Yes.
But then Maxey just sort of surprised them and played really good defense. Like, it's like Maxey found this gear that, like, we're like, man, where's this been since you were like in college? Like, because he and Quickly had very similar reps coming out of college as being like longer than their height guards. They were pretty good on defense, good on offense, whatever. And, Quickly, we obviously saw what he's done for his career with the Knicks and otherwise as far as his defensive ability. But Maxey has kind of carved himself more out as just an offensive force more so than the defensive one. But he really gave Brunson fits. So, like, I think you're going to need to find something, something different to go for, to strive for going forward. And whether that's like, do you try to get the switch onto Embiid? Like, do you try to make that 1-5 switch? Like, can you pull that off? Like, is that even going to happen? Or, or is Philly going to be well prepared enough to have guys to kind of cheat over, double real quick, or, slash triple, when you're in that pick and roll scenario to try to get, Brunson just off enough that then everybody can find their original man again. It's going to be a chess match the whole time. And, it doesn't help the Knicks case that the Sixers are also going into zone, which, is something in and of itself that I think we should probably talk about in the next segment.
Yeah, one final note on this is I wonder if when Maxey switches onto Brunson, we can see Brunson get into his post game a little, because that's where, like, when he's really tortured smaller guards, that's generally where it works. The reason he probably hasn't, and I don't know if there's a way around this, is because Embiid's in that drop. Like, if he's around the rim, like Brunson can bully Maxey all he wants. Like, he's not going to want to shoot over Embiid a whole lot. But if you have other ways to pull Embiid away from the basket, which again, like not having a jump shooting 5, unless the Knicks go really nuclear and try Anunoby at the 5, which I just think Embiid's too good and too big to do that on a full-time basis. But it would be interesting in the non-Embiid minutes if Maxey's out there and Brunson's out there. That's when I would go to that and try and attack Maxey in the post, because I think Brunson's just too strong for him. But Alex, we got to talk about attacking Philly's defense as a whole, and then maybe some final miscellaneous adjustments. We're going to get into all that next on Locked On Knicks.
This next segment is brought to you by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. So today, I want to say how I really feel about something. You might even be thinking about the same thing this week. And, I could say something about the Knicks or the playoffs or whatever, but instead, I'll get a little more real. I'll talk about the plight of the podcaster this time of year. We're under more of a spotlight. We're having more people listen to our shows. There's more things to do. There's more episodes to put out. We're working harder than ever this time of year. Certainly appreciate all of you listening, and whenever we get positive feedback, but then there's always going to be the people that give the negative feedback. It's enough to weigh on your psyche a bit, make you wonder if you're doing a good job, how everything's going. So, it's good problems to have when you're in a position to be talking about a sports team that you like and all that stuff, but it can still, like any job, get stressful. And this time of year is certainly no different. But if I want to talk about someone other than all of you listening about this, therapy could be different for everyone. And most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team, or even our insecurities about our podcasting abilities. And it's important to get these things off your chest every once in a while. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
And we also want to tell you about our newest friends over at Monopoly Go. Guys, I need you all to listen up for this huge announcement. I've been tracking the leaderboards every day, keeping my eye on the scores, putting all my heart into it. I'm super pumped to announce I am finally on top. That's right. Obviously, I'm talking about the mobile game Monopoly Go. You've probably heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great mobile twist on classic Monopoly. You can play anywhere, anytime. You can explore hundreds of Monopoly boards from Las Vegas to Camelot to the moon, all while raking in a huge fortune. You can charge rent on iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly. You can charge your friends rent on your iconic properties, or go after their Monopoly money. This is my favorite part, by pulling bank heists and taking wrecking balls to their landmarks. But my favorite part is the leaderboards, where you can see who's a Monopoly tycoon and who's gone bankrupt. So go get yourself on the charts. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store and Google Play. All right, Alex, one last go around. Some miscellaneous targets for the Knicks to hit in game 2. I'm going to throw it over to you. How should the Knicks, because I know you had a lot of thoughts on this, be attacking the Sixers zone defense that threw them for a curve a little bit in the second half? And their half-court offense was largely subsistent on offensive rebounding. They got 27 points in transition. That is abnormal for the Knicks. They only average 15 per game on the year. So they're going to have to do better in the half court, I think, as this series goes along to ultimately win.
Yeah, and that's going to involve breaking this zone defense, which seems to always be the issue for the Knicks, no matter what team they're facing. If a team goes zone, it's enough to throw them for a loop. You would think they would kind of know their way around it by this point. But, I think the Knicks they go in, they expect a certain thing. And then if they get a different thing, Tibbs is a little, needs like a game to think about it and come up with a better plan for the next game. But one thing that I would do for sure is work Brunson more off ball. If the Sixers are going zone, like just start working into an offense where you're going to just like the Knicks at their best without Brunson on the floor do this really well, I think, where they don't allow the defense any time to react to anything. They just get the ball to guys going downhill, get them driving straight in, kick back out to the perimeter. If you don't have a shot, start driving again or working your way around the perimeter. If you don't find something there, move it quick. Like, don't keep the ball in your hands for more than like 2 to 3 seconds. And we've seen some really beautiful possessions with like Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, Dante DiVincenzo, Deuce McBride, guys like that this season when they operate on that philosophy. So if you could just work Brunson into that, don't give it to Brunson in the half court and say, figure this out, or we're going to do the same thing that we usually do, set the screen from Hartenstein, even though they're running this zone defense, which is going to have someone helping now from that other side too. And now you're going to be looking at 3 bodies potentially. It's going to leave Josh Hart open over there, but then they're going to have Embiid drop back or Paul Reed drop back or whoever drop back to deal with him on the inside. Instead, just work on, quick moves, move the ball around, get Brunson moving around off the ball. It's one of his best skills that we saw less and less as the season went on because he became more and more the fulcrum of the offense. But during the Julius Randle time, it was a huge staple of his diet. And he shot 44.5% on spot up threes this year. So get him moving around, get him shooting movement threes off the catch. I think that's a winning combination. I also just think getting Dante DiVincenzo and OG Anunoby to their spots in the corners more often would be very beneficial. Like, the way to beat the zone, get a guy in the corner and, shoot those corner threes, because that's what's going to be left open, particularly because I think the Sixers were running sort of more of a 3-2 the other day, which especially leaves those corners open, because then you're not dealing with the usual 2-3 where you have 2 guys up top, 3 guys back. It's 3 guys up top spread around the perimeter and then 2 guys deep to try to, combat anything in there. That could potentially leave room for Dante DiVincenzo and OG Anunoby, especially where he is the best shooter in the NBA from the right corner, period. Like, he's held that title. I think he held it for this year. I mean, obviously, if he would have had the attempts, he would have had that title. But it's been one of his favorite spots his entire career. Start looking for him over there. And then use Josh Hart as an initiator sometimes. If they're going to leave him alone, I think he can, we've seen he can bring the ball down. He can get the action going. And like, if they're going to continue to disrespect him, maybe it's not him getting all the way to the rim against that zone, but at least just use him like a wrecking ball, get him going downhill, and drive in and then kick it out to someone who can take a shot, because they're going to have to if you let him get all the way to the cup, he's going to make it. Like, he's very good at finishing on the inside at this point and really did well with that this year. So I think using him is sort of the guy to bring the ball down, give Brunson a little time off, and then potentially kick it out to Brunson for a 3 off of initiating. Not a half bad strategy if you can pull it off.
Yeah, I want to see them. I know I mentioned this one already, but just continue to use Josh Hart as a screener. And to your point, that it's a little bit tougher against the zone where you don't have as clean of a target, but especially when the Sixers are in man. And that just forces Philadelphia to put someone on. Like, it's the old like Draymond Green conundrum where teams for years have tried this defense against Steph Curry, and they say, all right, you're going to do that. We're just going to have Draymond Green screen. And either you're letting Steph walk into a wide open 3, or you're having someone rush over who wasn't guarding Green to guard him. And then you're getting a 4-on-3 against a particularly discombobulated defense. And like Draymond Green, Josh Hart is capable of playmaking in that situation. To your point, he's capable of going downhill and getting all the way to the rim. So I want to see that. The other thing is, again, this is like the non-Embiid minutes are just incredibly important, because it feels like even like unless he somehow is in worse health than game 1, the Sixers are probably going to win the minutes when Embiid is on the floor. But the Knicks just smacked them last game when he was off the floor, and that has to continue to happen in this one. One way I think it can is using Mitchell Robinson as a target, running spread pick and roll. Paul Reed is a nice defender, but Mitch is just too big, too athletic. And as we keep noting, the one benefit of Julius Randle not being here is you can put 3 credible shooters on the floor. We get to that lineup you mentioned where it's one of Deuce and DiVincenzo, Bogdanovich, and Anunoby. teams either have to pick their poison between helping off a shooter and allowing an open three, or allowing Mitch an open run at the rim. Like Mitch had one that should have been a lob dunk. Brunson just didn't make the pass. He's going to see that on film. He's going to make it this time around. I think that could kill the Sixers in those non-Embiid minutes. And then my final thing, Alex, and I want to hear your thoughts on this as well, because to me, it's maybe like defensively the single most important thing going into this game too. And we haven't really talked about it yet, but finding better solutions against Tyrese Maxey. I'm treating him a little bit the same way that the Sixers treated Jalen Brunson, and I'm helping off a non-shooter on him. Like I'm blitzing the ball out of his hands, because what the Knicks were doing in game one, which was basically daring Maxey to go at their centers, like it wasn't working. Like he's just too quick. And whoever's guarding Kelly Oubre, I'm having them help. And we saw Oubre at one point in game one have a wide open corner three, 31% on the year, was terrified to take it. And he ended up just driving and killing the possession. And if the Knicks can put him and Tobias Harris in position to make decisions with someone like rotating over and help, and they either have to take a quick trigger three or drive the ball, I just think that's so much better for the Knicks. Maybe Philadelphia finds good answers against that, but especially in game two, that's an adjustment I'd try, and I'd see what Nick Nurse is able to counter with, because Maxey just getting all the way to the rim is death, and it almost cost the Knicks in this game.
Yeah, I think I would start instead of Anunoby on him, where I mean, OG, for as phenomenal of a defender as he is, he's just not the best equipped guy to deal with like a Tyrese Maxey, De'Aaron Fox, like super duper quick guard like that. Start with DiVincenzo on him, and just have him be serviceable. You know what I mean? Like have him play his best. Have Anunoby ready to cheat over, like you said, because quite frankly, I'm not scared by either of the starting forwards for Philly from a scoring perspective. Like you said it, Tobias Harris, we were talking about it before, 1 foot out the door already in the middle of a playoff series. And clearly in his own head, he's airballing threes. He just looks like crap lately. So dare him to beat you, or dare Kelly Oubre, who's just not that good of a shooter. And then that's the guy that you want to say, yeah, okay, if you don't want to shoot the three and then you want to try to get all the way to the rim, feel free. Be my guest. Like, go meet Isaiah Hartenstein or Mitchell Robinson there and see how that goes.
I almost wonder if they like pivot to Hield or Batum at some point over Harris. Like that, I like, is that, remember last year when the Cavs put in LeVert for Okoro? Like that would, obviously Batum's very good on defense, but especially going with Hield, that would almost feel like the equivalent of that.
Yeah, they might. I mean, because Harris just seems completely checked out. So who's to say? But as long as they're going to stick with them starting, well, you got to try to take advantage early and get a good early lead rather than, the alternative of falling into a deep hole again. But yeah, I think they definitely need to change some things with Maxey and giving him more respect, more doubles, more guys shading over would definitely be part of it. My last note, and then if you have anything to finish on, feel free. But my last thing goes sort of similar to that. I just think Tibbs needs to be more willing to pull the plug on the starters if things aren't working. And we saw the Knicks get down huge in the first half. They made a comeback once Deuce and Bogey and Mitch got in the game. Then they end up by 12 at the half. And then we see the second half, Tibbs leaves the starters in, makes the first sub at 4 minutes in the third quarter. And the Knicks had already coughed up that entire 12-point lead, and momentum was totally gone. He's got to be more willing if things are not working. I know he loves to have faith in his guys. He loves to stick with them, whatever. But if things don't look good, even from the opening tip in the first 3 minutes, call a timeout and make at least one sub. Like, you got to do it. You got to be willing to like hold guys accountable and make changes for the betterment of the game and the betterment of the team. Luckily, it didn't end up costing the Knicks the game in the last game, but it came damn close. And I don't want to be staring that situation in the face again.
Yeah, I think that is a good note to end on. We will have you covered tomorrow night on game 2. Tune into that. I'm not sure if we're going to do the same thing as game 1 and post it the night up. Maybe it depends on if the Knicks win. But until then, we'll talk to you very soon. He's Alex. I'm Gavin. This was Locked On Knicks. Peace out.